Toi jam bien tap lai joan, van ban nei, chi sua loik suang dong kong, hop li je van ban, tro nande jok hon. Hong thay joy noi dung, kwao chu, hai e nhia. Adam Schiff just made the most catastrophic error of his political career. He called FBI Director Kash Patel, the man with access to every federal investigation, Trump's puppet in a Senate hearing. Fatal mistake. Kash Patel's response was methodical and devastating. Senator Schiff, you want to question my integrity? Let's discuss why the FBI is currently investigating you for mortgage fraud. You claimed your Maryland house was your primary residence to get cheaper loans, while also claiming your California condo was your primary residence to avoid taxes. He paused, letting that sink in. That's federal bank fraud. Senator, you defrauded Fannie Mae for 16 years to save money on interest rates. And that's just the beginning. Should we also discuss your classified leaks, or how you lied to the American people about Russia collusion evidence you knew didn't exist? The Senate chamber went completely silent. What happened in the next 2 hours will go down as the most systematic destruction of a politician's credibility in Senate history. Smash that like button because you're about to watch the FBI director who wrote the Nunes memo expose the senator who spent years lying about Russia collusion. This public defender turned FBI director, the man who prosecuted actual terrorists and wrote the memo exposing FISA abuse, just declassified evidence that will end Adam Schiff's Senate career before it really begins. Kash Patel has been waiting for this moment since 2017 when he was investigating Russian interference and discovered that Adam Schiff was leaking classified information and lying about evidence he knew didn't exist. You see, Schiff thought his days of accountability were over. He thought becoming a senator would protect him. He thought nobody would dare challenge his claims about defending democracy. He was catastrophically wrong. When you attack the FBI director, someone who has first-hand knowledge of your lies, access to every federal investigation, and the authority to declassify documents proving your crimes, you better be clean as a whistle. Schiff's record? Let's just say a federal mortgage fraud investigation, House censure for lying, and evidence of classified leaks isn't exactly clean. This is bigger than one senator's corruption. This is the day America finally saw what happens when a politician who built his career on manufactured scandals faces someone with actual evidence of real crimes. This is the day a liar met a prosecutor who had the receipts. Let's go. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room was packed. 6 months after his controversial 51-49 confirmation vote, FBI Director Kash Patel was back for his first major oversight hearing. The official purpose, progress report on FBI reforms and operations. The real purpose, Adam Schiff wanted revenge. The California senator, freshly elected in 2024, had spent years as Trump's nemesis, House Intelligence Committee chairman, lead impeachment manager, the public face of Russia investigation claims. And Kash Patel? He'd been on the other side, senior counsel to Devin Nunes, primary author of the memo exposing FISA abuse. The guy who helped prove the Russia investigation was built on political opposition research. These two had been adversaries for 8 years. Today was Schiff's chance to publicly destroy Trump's FBI director. Or so he thought. What Schiff didn't know was that Patel had spent the previous month preparing for this exact confrontation. As FBI director, Patel had done something his predecessors hadn't. He'd actually read the files on Adam Schiff. All of them. The mortgage fraud investigation that had been quietly proceeding in Maryland, the classified information about Schiff's leaks during the Russia probe, the evidence Schiff had lied about having proof of collusion, everything. And he'd brought copies because Kash Patel wasn't a career bureaucrat trying to avoid controversy. He was a prosecutor who'd tried 60 jury trials and never backed down from a fight. If Schiff wanted a public confrontation, Patel was ready to give him one with evidence. Adam Schiff arrived at the hearing with his usual sense of moral superiority. He'd been doing this for 24 years in Congress. He knew how to destroy political opponents in hearings. He'd practiced his lines: Trump's puppet, threat to FBI independence, political weaponization. His communications team was ready to clip the viral moments for social media. His fundraising emails were already drafted. "I stood up to Trump's FBI director today." He even had friendly journalists seated in the press section, ready to write stories about Patel's evasive answers and concerning testimony. Schiff didn't just want to embarrass Patel. He wanted to wound him politically, make him toxic, lay groundwork for eventually forcing his resignation. Because that's what Schiff did. He was a master at using hearings as weapons: ask leading questions, make accusations, act outraged, let the media run with it. It had worked on Trump officials for years. Why would this be different? After all, Schiff was now a senator. More power, more prestige, national platform. And Patel? He was a controversial FBI director who'd barely been confirmed. Half the country thought he was unqualified. Democrats hated him. Schiff was about to make him squirm. In the witness chair, Kash Patel looked calm, almost too calm. He'd testified before Congress dozens of times before, as NSC official, as deputy DNI, as DOD chief of staff. He knew how these hearings worked, but this was different. He wasn't here to defend policy decisions or explain intelligence assessments. He was here because Adam Schiff had specifically requested this hearing and specifically asked to question him. Patel knew exactly what Schiff was planning. The attacks were predictable. Trump loyalist, FBI weaponization, threat to democracy, blah, blah, blah. What Schiff didn't know was that Patel had spent the last month as FBI director doing what any good investigator does: following the evidence. And the evidence on Adam Schiff was interesting. Very interesting. Sitting in front of Patel were several folders, each one marked with case numbers, each one relating to ongoing investigations, each one legally declassified by Patel the previous night, because that's the thing about being FBI director. You can declassify anything you determine to be in the public interest. And Patel had determined that America had a very strong public interest in knowing the truth about Senator Adam Schiff. All of it. The first hour of the hearing was routine. Republican senators asking friendly questions about crime statistics and terrorism threats. Democratic senators pressing on January 6th investigations and political independence. Patel handled them professionally. Direct answers, no drama, exactly what you'd expect from an FBI director. Then it was Adam Schiff's turn. The California senator adjusted his microphone with that practiced gravitas he'd perfected over decades. The cameras focused on him. This was his moment. "Director Patel," Schiff began, his voice dripping with contempt, "I want to address something that concerns many Americans, including myself." He paused for effect. Every reporter in the room leaned forward. "Your appointment to lead the FBI was controversial from the beginning. You are seen, rightfully in my opinion, as a political operative installed by President Trump to weaponize the FBI against his perceived enemies." Patel didn't react, just listened, taking notes. Schiff continued, building momentum. "You wrote the Nunes memo that attempted to discredit the Russia investigation. You've promoted conspiracy theories about the deep state. You've been a vocal defender of a president who was impeached twice." "Senator," Patel started. "I'm not finished," Schiff cut him off sharply. "The question Americans are asking is simple. Are you Trump's puppet, using the FBI to settle political scores? Or are you an independent law enforcement officer committed to the rule of law? It was a classic Schiff move. Frame the question so any answer sounds defensive. Make the accusation that will play on cable news regardless of the response. The room was silent, waiting for Patel's response. Cash Patel looked at Adam Schiff for exactly 5 seconds. Not angry, not defensive, just calculating. Then he reached for the first folder. "Senator Schiff," Patel began, his voice professionally calm, "I'm going to answer your question about puppets and political weaponization, but first, I think we need to establish who exactly has been abusing their position for political purposes." He opened the folder. "You see, as FBI director, I have access to ongoing criminal investigations, and one of those investigations happens to involve you." Schiff's confident expression flickered for just a moment. "Now, before you interrupt me again, Senator, let me be clear. Every document I'm about to reference has been legally declassified as of last night, because I determined the American people have a compelling interest in knowing the truth." Patel pulled out the first document. "Let's start with your mortgage fraud, shall we, Senator Schiff?" Patel continued, his tone shifting to pure prosecutor mode. "You own 2 properties, a home in Potomac, Maryland, that you purchased for $870,000 in 2003, and a condo in Burbank, California." He held up the first document so cameras could see the official FBI seal. "This is a criminal referral from the Federal Housing Finance Agency to the Department of Justice. It was filed in May 2025, 4 months ago, and it accuses you of mortgage fraud." The room erupted, reporters frantically typing, senators looking shocked, cameras zooming in on both men. Schiff tried to maintain composure. "That's a politically motivated—" "Let me finish, Senator, since you didn't let me finish earlier." Patel's voice was ice-cold. "Between 2009 and 2013, you refinanced your Maryland property multiple times. Each time you signed documents under penalty of perjury stating that the Potomac house was your primary residence." He held up copies of loan documents. "But here's the problem. During those exact same years, you were also claiming the Burbank condo as your primary residence to receive California homeowner tax exemptions worth $7,000 annually." Patel looked directly at Schiff. "Senator, you can't have 2 primary residences. That's not how it works. What you can do is commit federal bank fraud to get better interest rates and tax fraud to reduce your California taxes. And that appears to be exactly what you did for 16 years. Patel pulled out a second folder, this one marked with Fannie Mae documentation. Fannie Mae's Financial Crimes Investigation Division completed an analysis of your mortgage history. Their conclusion, he read from the official report, Mr. Schiff engaged in a sustained pattern of possible occupancy misrepresentation on 5 Fannie Mae-backed loans. Let's break down what that means for Americans watching. When you claim a property as your primary residence, you get significantly better loan terms, lower interest rates, lower down payment requirements, better approval odds. You, Senator Schiff, claimed your Maryland home was your primary residence on mortgage applications in 2009, 2011, 2012, and 2013. But you lived in California. You represented California in Congress. You took a California tax deduction claiming the Burbank property as your primary residence. Patel held up property tax records from California. Here are your California property tax records showing you received the homeowner's exemption on your Burbank condo, an exemption only available for primary residences. For the exact same years, you were telling your Maryland lender that the Potomac house was your primary residence. He spread the documents out. This isn't a complex case, Senator. This is textbook mortgage fraud. You knowingly made false statements to a financial institution to obtain economic benefits. The FBI estimates you saved approximately $140,000 in interest charges over those 16 years by fraudulently claiming primary residence status. Schiff's face was red. Those loans were legitimate. The lenders knew. The lenders knew what, Senator? That you were committing fraud? Patel pulled out another document. This is the Federal Housing Finance Agency's analysis of potential violations. Let me read them for you. 18 U.S.C. Section 1343, wire fraud. 18 U.S.C. Section 1341, mail fraud. 18 U.S.C. Section 1344, bank fraud. 18 U.S.C. Section 10114, false statements to a financial institution. Each of these carries up to 30 years in federal prison. The room was completely silent. You asked if I'm Trump's puppet, Senator. Let me ask you a question. When you signed those mortgage documents under penalty of perjury, claiming the Maryland house was your primary residence while you were actually living in and representing California, were you knowingly committing fraud? And here's what makes this even more interesting. Patel continued, not giving Schiff time to respond. You didn't correct this error until October 2020, after Donald Trump was no longer president, and after you thought the issue would never come up. He held up mortgage documentation. On October 13, 2020, you suddenly refinanced the Maryland property and finally designated it correctly as a second home. Why the sudden change, Senator, after 17 years of claiming it as your primary residence? Patel leaned forward. Could it be that someone in your office realized that your mortgage fraud could be discovered? That the financial benefit you'd been receiving was actually illegal? Your own 2023 spokesperson told CNN, and I quote, Adams, California and Maryland addresses have been listed as primary residences for loan purposes because they are both occupied throughout the year. Patel looked at the committee. That's not how federal law works. You can't list two properties as primary residences for loan purposes. That's the definition of mortgage fraud. Adam Schiff had been in Congress long enough to know when he was in trouble. This wasn't going according to plan. Director Patel, he said, trying to regain control, these are routine mortgage matters that my lenders were fully aware of. I was transparent about my living situation. This is a manufactured controversy by political appointees trying to... Transparent? Patel cut him off. Senator, you signed legal documents under penalty of perjury. These aren't routine matters. These are federal crimes. I have an attorney who can explain. Yes, you hired Pitt Barrara, the former U.S. attorney. I'm aware. And his defense essentially admits that you did claim both properties as primary residences, but argues that doesn't matter, because the lenders knew. Patel held up Barrara's letter. But that's not a defense, Senator. It's an admission. The statute says you can't make false statements to obtain economic benefit. Whether the lender knew is irrelevant if you still received the benefit. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Maryland has had an open criminal investigation into your conduct for 4 months. As FBI director, I was briefed on the evidence last week. Patel paused. And I can tell you, Senator, the case is strong. Very strong. Schiff looked like he might be sick. But the mortgage fraud is actually not the worst thing in your file. Patel opened a second, much thicker folder. Let's talk about Russia collusion, Senator, since you mentioned my work on the Nunes memo. He held up an official document. On June 21, 2023, the United States House of Representatives voted to censure you. The vote was 213 to 209. The censure resolution accused you of misleading the public with falsehoods, misrepresentations, and abuses of sensitive information. Schiff tried to interrupt. That was a partisan. The resolution specifically cited your repeated claims that you had seen evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. Let me read some of your statements. Senator Patel pulled out transcripts. March 22, 2017. You told Chuck Todd there is more than circumstantial evidence now of collusion. March 2017, CNN. I can't go into the particulars, but there is more than circumstantial evidence. May 2018. There is plenty of evidence of collusion in plain sight. He looked up from the documents. You made these statements while serving as ranking member and then chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. You had access to all the classified information, all the intercepts, all the intelligence assessments. And what did that intelligence actually show? Senator Patel held up the Mueller report summary. Special Counsel Mueller did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government. Durham report. The Russia investigation was launched without proper predication and was politically motivated. The House Intelligence Committee investigation that I helped conduct. No evidence of criminal conspiracy. So my question is simple, Senator. When you repeatedly told the American people that you had seen evidence of collusion, were you lying? Or did you actually believe classified information that said the opposite showed collusion? You mentioned my work on the Nunes memo, Senator. Let me remind this committee what that memo actually said. Patel pulled out the declassified document. In February 2018, I helped write and research a memo documenting how the FBI had abused the FISA system to surveil Carter Page, a Trump campaign associate. The memo revealed that the Steele dossier, opposition research funded by the Clinton campaign, was used as the primary evidence to obtain FISA warrants. The memo revealed that the FBI didn't tell the FISA court that the evidence came from a political opposition research firm. The memo revealed massive abuse of the surveillance system for political purposes. He looked directly at Schiff. And you, Senator Schiff, wrote a counter-memo calling our findings misleading and inaccurate. You called the Nunes memo a threat to national security. Patel held up Schiff's counter-memo. You wrote, FBI and DOJ officials did not abuse the FISA process. You wrote, the FBI's investigation was lawfully predicated. You wrote, the FBI conducted itself appropriately. He paused for effect. Senator, every single one of those claims has been proven false by subsequent investigations. The Inspector General's report confirmed the FBI abused the FISA process. The Durham report confirmed the investigation lacked proper predication. Multiple FISA warrant applications were found to contain material errors and omissions. So, the Nunes memo I helped write, completely accurate, vindicated by multiple investigations. Your counter-memo, completely false, debunked by the evidence. Patel leaned back. Yet you spent years on cable television calling me a conspiracy theorist and a political hack. You went on MSNBC, CNN, every network, claiming the Nunes memo was dangerous misinformation. When in fact, Senator, you were the one spreading misinformation. You were the one lying to the American people. You were the one abusing your position as Intelligence Committee Chairman to push a false narrative. And unlike you, I can actually prove my claims. But here's what really matters, Patel said, pulling out a new set of documents. Last month, as FBI Director, I declassified FBI interview notes from a former House Intelligence Committee staffer. These are interviews conducted during the first Trump administration. He held up the redacted documents. This staffer worked on your committee in 2017, and he told FBI investigators something very disturbing. Patel read from the interview notes. During a 2017 staff meeting, Chairman Schiff stated the group would leak classified information which was derogatory to President Trump. Schiff stated the information would be used to indict President Trump. The chamber erupted again. Senators talking over each other. Media frenzy. Schiff stood up. That is absolutely false. That staffer was— The staffer's name is redacted, Senator, because this is an ongoing investigation. But the FBI interviewed him 3 times, in 2017, 2019, and again in 2023. His story remained consistent. He accused you and Democratic staffers on your committee of treasonous activity. Those are his words, not mine. Now, the first Trump administration investigated these leaks. They couldn't prove who specifically leaked what information, but as FBI director, I've reviewed those files. Patel held up another folder. And I've authorized the reopening of that leak investigation because you're no longer chairman of the Intelligence Committee, Senator. You don't have congressional immunity protecting you. And there are specific classified documents that appeared in the media in 2017 and 2018. Documents that only a handful of people had access to, including you. And so we're going to find out, Senator, whether you used your position as chairman to illegally leak classified information for political purposes. That's another federal crime, by the way. 18 U.S. Code, Section 798, disclosure of classified information, up to 10 years in prison. The look on Schiff's face was pure panic. Let's talk about impeachment, Senator, since you were so proud of your role as lead manager. Patel pulled out congressional testimony transcripts. September 26, 2019. You're chairing an Intelligence Committee hearing about the Trump-Zelensky phone call, and you read this into the congressional record. Patel read from Schiff's own words. We've been very good to your country. Very good. No other country has done as much as we have. But you know what? I don't see much reciprocity here. I hear what you want. I have a favor I want from you, though. And I'm going to say this only 7 times, so you better listen good. I want you to make up dirt on my political opponent. Understand? Lots of it. That's what you said, Senator. You read that as if it was from the actual transcript of the call, except none of those words appear in the actual transcript. Patel held up the real transcript. You completely fabricated a version of the call to make it sound like a mob shakedown. You made up dialogue. You presented it to Congress and the American people as if it was real. And when you got called out for it, you claimed it was obvious parody. You said everyone knew you were joking. Senator, you were testifying in an official congressional hearing about whether to impeach the President of the United States. There was nothing in your statement indicating it was a joke. Nothing. You deliberately misrepresented evidence in a formal congressional proceeding, and then you claimed it was parody when caught. Patel looked at the committee. That's not comedy, Senator. That's fraud. It's fabricating evidence. It's exactly the kind of prosecutorial misconduct that would get a district attorney disbarred. But you weren't a prosecutor anymore. You were a congressman with immunity, so you got away with it. You got away with manufacturing false evidence in an impeachment inquiry. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Here's what really bothers me about your conduct, Senator. Patel pulled out fundraising records. After you were censured by the House in June 2023, your campaign sent out fundraising emails calling it a badge of honor. He held up the emails. You raised $8.2 million in the 2 weeks after your censure. You turned your official rebuke by Congress into a fundraising bonanza. During the Russia investigation years, your campaign raised over $35 million, much of it from small donors who believed your claims about having evidence of collusion. You wrote in fundraising emails, "I've seen the evidence. It's damning. Help me expose Trump." But you hadn't seen evidence, Senator. The Mueller report proved that. The Durham report proved that. Your own Intelligence Committee investigation proved that. You lied to your donors to raise money, and it worked. You became one of the highest fundraising members of Congress by constantly claiming you were about to expose Trump's collusion. Then you used that money and name recognition to run for Senate. Congratulations, Senator. You successfully monetized lies about Russia collusion and converted House censure into campaign contributions. Patel leaned forward. But here's the problem with building a political career on manufactured scandal. Eventually, someone shows up with evidence of your real scandals. And that person is me. After Republicans took control of the House in 2023, Speaker McCarthy removed you from the Intelligence Committee. You called it political retaliation. But let's be clear about why you were removed, Senator. Patel read from Speaker McCarthy's statement. Representative Schiff has demonstrated a pattern of abusing access to classified information for political purposes. He cannot be trusted with America's secrets. You were the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, Senator. You had access to the nation's most sensitive information, and Republicans determined you couldn't be trusted with it anymore. That's not normal, Senator. Committee assignments are usually routine, but your conduct was so egregious that Republicans felt they had no choice but to remove you. And they were right. Patel held up the leak investigation files. Because, as we're now discovering, you allegedly used your access to classified information to leak selectively to friendly media outlets to push your Russia collusion narrative. You had access to intelligence showing no evidence of collusion, but you leaked pieces of information out of context to make it seem like there was collusion. That's not oversight, Senator. That's manipulation. That's abuse of power. As someone who spent years in the intelligence community, as a national security prosecutor, as Deputy Director of National Intelligence, as NSC Counterterrorism Director, I can tell you that what you did was worse than incompetence. It was betrayal. You betrayed the intelligence professionals who worked to gather that information. You betrayed the oversight process. You betrayed the American people who trusted you to be honest about classified intelligence. And you did it all to advance your political career and fundraise from people who thought you were defending democracy. Schiff was visibly shaking now, his earlier confidence completely destroyed. But wait, Senator. We're not done yet. Let me tie this all together, Senator, because I want the American people to understand the pattern here. Patel laid out multiple folders side by side. Mortgage fraud. You signed documents under penalty of perjury claiming false resident status. Duration, 16 years. Benefit, $140,000 in savings through fraudulent interest rates. Russia collusion. Lies. You claimed for years to have seen evidence that didn't exist. You went on television hundreds of times lying to the American people. Benefit, $35 million in campaign fundraising. National prominence, Senate seat. Classified leaks. You allegedly directed staff to leak classified information selectively to push a false narrative. Benefit, media attention, political damage to opponents. Impeachment fabrication. You manufactured fake dialogue and presented it as evidence in a formal congressional proceeding. Benefit, lead manager role, book deals, speaking fees. House censure. Instead of showing remorse, you monetized it for campaign funds. Benefit, $8 million raised. Patel looked directly at Schiff. Senator, this isn't about political differences. This isn't about Trump versus anti-Trump. This is about a pattern of dishonesty spanning decades. You lie when it benefits you financially. You lie when it benefits you politically. You abuse access to classified information. You fabricate evidence. You manipulate donors. And when caught, you claim it's all politically motivated attacks. But, Senator, these aren't attacks. These are documented facts, federal investigations, House censures, congressional testimony, sworn mortgage documents, You can't spin your way out of your own signature on mortgage fraud documents. You can't claim the Mueller report that found no collusion actually proves you were right about collusion. You can't explain away the Durham report that exposed the whole investigation as politically motivated. The evidence is overwhelming. You're not a defender of democracy, Senator. You're a serial liar who got caught. You want to talk about my background, Senator? You called me a political operative. Patel's voice was controlled but intense. My father fled Uganda when Idi Amin expelled all Asians in 1972. He came to America with nothing. My family lived with 8 brothers, sisters, their spouses, and kids, all under one roof. I worked my way through the University of Richmond and Pace Law School. I started as a public defender in Miami, representing people who couldn't afford lawyers. I tried over 60 jury trials to verdict. I became a federal prosecutor under the Obama administration. I prosecuted terrorists, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. I led investigations in war zones. I served on the National Security Council. I was Deputy Director of National Intelligence, overseeing 17 intelligence agencies. I was Chief of Staff at the Department of Defense. Every position I earned through work, Senator, not through political connections, not through manufactured scandals, not through lying about evidence. He contrasted with Schiff. You've been in Congress since 2001, 24 years of insider politics. You live in a $2 million condo in Burbank and an $870,000 house in Potomac. You went to Stanford and Harvard. You've been a politician your entire adult life. And yet somehow I'm the political operative and you're the defender of democratic norms? Senator, the only thing you've defended is your own career advancement, and you've done it by lying repeatedly to the American people. My parents didn't flee dictatorship and build a life in America so politicians like you could abuse the system for personal gain. Here's what I know as a former prosecutor and current FBI director. Patel stood up, his voice carrying complete authority. When someone commits mortgage fraud for 16 years, that's not a mistake. That's a sustained pattern of criminal conduct. When someone lies under oath in congressional testimony, that's not a mistake. That's perjury. When someone abuses access to classified information for political purposes, that's not a mistake. That's a betrayal of public trust. When someone builds a Senate campaign on demonstrable lies about evidence they never had, that's not public service. That's fraud. You, Senator Schiff, have done all of these things, and now you sit in the United States Senate with a 6-year term thinking you're immune from accountability. But here's what you didn't calculate, Senator. I'm not a politician trying to avoid controversy. I'm a prosecutor who believes in the rule of law. As FBI director, I have a duty to ensure the FBI investigates credible allegations of federal crimes, and there are multiple credible allegations against you. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Maryland is investigating your mortgage fraud. The FBI's leak investigation has been reopened to examine your role in classified disclosures. The House Ethics Committee's findings about your Russia claims are being reviewed for potential perjury charges. You asked if I'm Trump's puppet. Let me be crystal clear. I serve the Constitution and the law, nothing else. But the law applies to everyone, Senator, including you. You spent years investigating President Trump. You impeached him. You censured him. You accused him of crimes. Turnabout is fair play, Senator. Welcome to being on the receiving end of an investigation based on actual evidence. Schiff looked completely destroyed. His political career, built on righteous opposition to Trump, was crumbling in real time on live television. But Patel wasn't finished. Patel's voice softened, but somehow became more powerful. Senator, let me tell you about why I became a public defender. In 2005, I started practicing law in Miami-Dade County. I represented people who couldn't afford attorneys, people accused of crimes, sometimes guilty, sometimes innocent, but all deserving of a fair defense. I learned something in those courtrooms that you've apparently never learned in 24 years of Congress. Evidence matters. Truth matters. You don't convict people based on political motivations or public pressure. I had a case in 2015, United States versus Trago, a major drug trafficking case, Operation Bakri. My client was one of several Colombian nationals arrested. And you know what? We discovered the prosecution had withheld exculpatory evidence. They hid information that would have helped my client's defense. When we exposed that prosecutorial misconduct, my client was released. That experience shaped my view of justice. Senator, when prosecutors abuse their power, when they hide evidence, when they lie to obtain convictions, that's not justice. That's tyranny. He looked directly at Schiff. And what you did with the Russia investigation was the same thing, Senator. You had evidence that showed no collusion. The intelligence assessments said there was no coordination, no conspiracy. But you hid that evidence from the American people. You went on television and claimed you'd seen damning proof. You used your position as Intelligence Committee Chairman to push a narrative you knew was false. That's prosecutorial misconduct, Senator. That's abuse of power. The difference is, my client was fighting for his freedom. President Trump was fighting against a politically motivated investigation designed to destroy his presidency. And you were leading that effort. You were the public face of lies about Russia collusion. As someone who spent years defending people against government abuse, as someone who prosecuted actual terrorists and saw what real national security threats look like, as someone who values truth and evidence, what you did disgusts me, Senator. You weren't defending democracy. You were abusing your power to target a political opponent. You wrapped yourself in the flag while lying to the American people. That's not patriotism. That's corruption. Let me tell you what it was like working in the intelligence community during your Russia investigation circus. Patel's voice was heavy with controlled anger. I was Deputy Director of National Intelligence. I oversaw 17 intelligence agencies, thousands of dedicated professionals working to keep America safe. And while they were out there risking their lives collecting intelligence on ISIS, tracking North Korean missiles, monitoring Chinese espionage, you were on television lying about their work. You claimed the intelligence showed collusion. It didn't. You claimed the FISA warrants were properly obtained. They weren't. You claimed the Steele dossier was credible intelligence. It was opposition research. Every time you lied on television, you damaged the credibility of the intelligence community. Every time you leaked classified information selectively to push your narrative, you undermined sources and methods. Every time you abused your access to sensitive information, you made it harder for intelligence professionals to do their jobs. I worked with CIA officers who'd spent decades recruiting assets in dangerous countries. I worked with NSA analysts who'd spent years building collection capabilities. And you treated their work like political ammunition. You cherry-picked information. You took things out of context. You lied about what the intelligence actually showed. That's not oversight, Senator. That's betrayal. And you betrayed the men and women who serve in the shadows to keep America safe. You betrayed them for political gain, for fundraising, for cable news appearances. But Schiff showed no shame, just panic. Senator, I saved the best for last. Patel pulled out one final folder. This one was thicker than all the others. As FBI Director, I can access any FBI investigation, active or closed, successful or not. And I pulled the files from the original leak investigation into your committee in 2017 to 2018. He held up the folder. The investigation that couldn't prove who specifically leaked what information. the investigation that stalled because you were a sitting congressman with immunity. Well, Senator, you're not chairman of the Intelligence Committee anymore. You don't have that same level of protection. And this file contains evidence that directly links specific leaks of classified information to you and your staff. Communications between your staffers and reporters, metadata on when information was accessed and when articles were published, patterns that show coordination. Patel looked directly at the cameras. I'm referring this evidence to the Department of Justice for a new leak prosecution. Not because Trump wants it, not because of politics, but because the evidence shows you violated 18 U.S. Code, Section 798, Disclosure of Classified Information. That's a federal crime, Senator. And unlike your mortgage fraud, where the statute of limitations might be an issue, disclosure of classified information has no such limitation. You can be prosecuted today for leaks that happened in 2017. He closed the folder. So to answer your original question, Senator, no, I'm not Trump's puppet. I'm the FBI director, and I follow the evidence. Right now, the evidence leads to you. The Senate chamber was in chaos. Senators arguing, media in frenzy, Schiff sitting in shock. The public defender turned FBI director had just systematically destroyed one of the most powerful Democrats in the country. With evidence. For a full 30 seconds, nobody spoke. The chairman of the Judiciary Committee sat frozen, unsure how to proceed. This wasn't a normal hearing anymore. This was a public prosecution of one of their own members. Adam Schiff remained in his seat, pale, hands trembling slightly. The confident senator who'd started the hearing planning to destroy Patel had been absolutely eviscerated. Every camera in the room was focused on him. Every reporter frantically typing. The live feeds had exploded with millions of viewers. This wasn't just a hearing anymore. This was the moment a sitting U.S. senator was publicly exposed for mortgage fraud, Russia collusion lies, classified leaks, and abuse of power. And it was all on video, with documents, with evidence, with the FBI director systematically presenting each charge. Finally, the chairman found his voice. Director Patel, this is highly irregular. These are serious allegations against a sitting senator. These are serious crimes, Mr. Chairman. Patel cut him off. And if Senator Schiff weren't sitting here in the Senate, he'd likely already be indicted. The chairman didn't know what to say to that because it was probably true. Senator Dick Durbin, the senior Democrat on the committee, tried to come to Schiff's defense. Director Patel, this appears to be a politically motivated attack on a senator who has been a vocal critic of President Trump. Senator Durbin, with all due respect, I just presented evidence of federal crimes, signed mortgage documents, House censure resolutions, FBI investigation files, congressional testimony. None of that is politically motivated. It's documented fact. Patel held up the mortgage documents again. Senator Schiff signed these documents under penalty of perjury. Are you saying his signature is fake? That the FHFA made up the criminal referral? That Fannie Mae fabricated their fraud analysis? Durbin backpedaled. I'm saying the timing is suspicious. The timing? Patel interrupted. Senator, the mortgage fraud went on for 16 years. The Russia collusion lies went on for 5 years. The House censured him in 2023. These aren't new issues. What's new is that I'm the first FBI director willing to actually hold him accountable. Another Democratic senator tried a different approach. Director Patel, are you really going to investigate and potentially prosecute a sitting U.S. senator over mortgage documents from years ago? Senator, Patel replied calmly, if a regular citizen had done what Senator Schiff did, claimed 2 primary residences, committed bank fraud, saved $140,000 through false statements, they would already be in federal prison. The question isn't whether I'm going to investigate a senator. The question is whether senators are above the law. He looked around the room, and my answer is no. Nobody is above the law. Not presidents, not senators, not FBI directors. The evidence of Senator Schiff's crimes is overwhelming. The FBI will follow that evidence wherever it leads. If the U.S. attorney believes there's enough for prosecution, Senator Schiff will be prosecuted. That's not political. That's justice. The Democratic senators had no response because what could they say? The evidence was public now. The criminal referral was real. The investigation was active. Schiff was in serious legal trouble. Adam Schiff finally tried to speak, his voice shaky. Mr. Chairman, Director Patel has abused his position to weaponize the FBI against me because I investigated President Trump. Senator, Patel interrupted, his voice steel. I was part of the Trump administration. I worked on the Ukraine impeachment response. I know exactly what you did. And I'm not investigating you because you investigated Trump. I'm investigating you because you committed federal crimes. The mortgage fraud existed before Trump was president. The Russia collusion lies continued after Trump left office. Your abuse of classified information was directed at Trump, but the crime is the abuse itself. This isn't about Trump, Senator. This is about you. Schiff tried again. The American people will see this for what it is: political persecution. The American people will see evidence, Senator. Signed documents, congressional resolutions, criminal referrals, FBI investigations. You've spent your entire career telling Americans to trust the institutions, to follow the evidence, to support the rule of law. Well, Senator, this is what that looks like when it's applied to you. Patel gathered his folders. I came here today to answer questions about FBI operations. Instead, I've spent the last 2 hours responding to your accusation that I'm a Trump puppet. I've responded with evidence, with facts, with ongoing investigations. If you have evidence to refute anything I've presented, Senator, I'd love to see it. But shouting political persecution isn't evidence. It's desperation. The hearing room was chaos. Republicans looking satisfied. Democrats looking shell-shocked. Media having a field day. And Adam Schiff, the man who destroyed multiple Trump officials in hearings, sat devastated, destroyed by someone with actual evidence of actual crimes. Within minutes of the hearing ending, the footage went supernova across every platform. Patel destroys, Schiff trended at 18 million mentions in the first hour. Schiff mortgage fraud hit 12 million. Russia collusion lies reached 10 million. But this wasn't typical partisan social media warfare. Something different was happening. Even mainstream media outlets couldn't spin this away. The evidence was too overwhelming. The documents were too clear. Schiff's mortgage fraud was documented by Fannie Mae and FHFA. His House censure was a matter of public record. The Russia collusion claims were thoroughly debunked by Mueller and Durham reports. CNN's legal analyst, these mortgage fraud allegations are extremely serious. If proven, Senator Schiff could face federal charges. MSNBC, usually Schiff's strongest defender. The timeline of the mortgage documents is concerning. We need to see how Schiff responds to these specific allegations. Even. The New York Times ran a headline: Senator Schiff faces federal investigation over mortgage fraud claims. Conservative media was brutal. Schiff exposed, FBI director reveals years of lies and crimes. The most damaging coverage came from legal experts across the political spectrum, all reaching the same conclusion. If Schiff were anyone else, he'd already be indicted. Fox News had former federal prosecutors analyzing the evidence. The mortgage fraud case is straightforward. You can't claim two properties as primary residences. The documents show he did exactly that. That's textbook bank fraud. The false statement statute has a 5-year limit, but the wire fraud and mail fraud statutes apply to the continued benefit from those false statements. That extends the statute of limitations significantly. If the U.S. Attorney in Maryland has the evidence Patel described, this is an easy prosecution. For the first time in his political career, Adam Schiff couldn't control the narrative because the evidence was too strong. The political consequences came swiftly and devastatingly within 48 hours. First, the Senate Ethics Committee announced it was opening a formal investigation into Schiff's mortgage dealings and potential disclosure violations. Second, the California Attorney General announced a separate state investigation into potential state tax fraud related to the conflicting primary residence claims. Third, 3 Democratic members of the Senate Finance Committee called for Schiff to recuse himself from all financial services legislation until the investigations concluded. Fourth, Senator Schiff's approval rating dropped 21 points in California, his own state, as news of the mortgage fraud spread. More damaging for Democrats generally, the party had spent years positioning Schiff as the moral voice of anti-Trump resistance, the face of accountability, the defender of democracy. Now that image was destroyed. Republicans gleefully ran ads. Adam Schiff lied about Russia, lied to get better mortgages. What else is he lying about? Progressive activists who'd lionized Schiff felt betrayed. We donated millions to his campaigns because we believed he was fighting corruption. Turns out, he was corrupt. Democratic leadership was stuck. They couldn't defend Schiff without defending mortgage fraud, but abandoning him meant admitting they had elevated a fraud for years. Senate Majority Leader tried a middle path. Senator Schiff maintains his innocence and deserves due process. However, these allegations are serious and should be thoroughly investigated. That satisfied nobody. Republicans wanted prosecution. Progressives wanted explanation of how someone committing mortgage fraud for 16 years became their hero. Moderates wanted Schiff gone because he was now toxic to the entire Democratic brand. The California Democratic Party faced a crisis. Should they support their sitting senator or distance themselves from potential criminal charges? Governor Newsom, eyeing his own political future, notably did not defend Schiff. "Everyone deserves due process," was his carefully neutral statement. In less than a week, Adam Schiff went from rising Democratic star to political pariah. All because he attacked the wrong person, someone with evidence and the authority to use it. For Kash Patel, the hearing became a defining moment. His controversial 51-49 confirmation vote had been plagued by accusations of partisanship, lack of experience, and being Trump's puppet. Democrats had spent months claiming he would weaponize the FBI for political vengeance. But what happened in that Senate hearing proved something different. Patel had presented documented evidence, criminal referrals from federal agencies, FBI investigation files, congressional resolutions, signed mortgage documents. Nothing was fabricated. Nothing was made up. Everything was backed by evidence. Even critics who opposed his confirmation had to admit this wasn't political weaponization. This was legitimate law enforcement investigating credible allegations of federal crimes. USA Today. Editorial. Whatever one thinks of Director Patel's appointment, his presentation of evidence against Senator Schiff was professional and thorough. If these allegations are accurate, justice demands they be investigated. The Atlantic. The irony of Adam Schiff, who spent years demanding accountability for Trump, now facing accountability himself for alleged crimes, is striking. Patel's approval numbers jumped significantly. Among Republicans, 89% up from 79%. Among independents, 58%, up from 41%. Even among Democrats, 28%, up from 18%. More importantly, FBI agents and intelligence professionals praised his handling of the hearing. FBI Agents Association. Director Patel demonstrated that the FBI investigates evidence, not politics. We support his commitment to equal justice under law. Former CIA officers. Schiff's abuse of classified information damaged intelligence operations. Good to see accountability. 3 months after the hearing, when Patel testified before Congress again, even Democratic senators treated him with more respect. The Trump's puppet accusations had disappeared because Patel had proven something fundamental. He wasn't anyone's puppet. He was a prosecutor who followed evidence. And when the evidence showed a senator committed crimes, he did his job regardless of politics. 6 months after the Senate hearing, the landscape had fundamentally changed. Adam Schiff was indicted by a federal grand jury in Maryland on 3 counts of bank fraud related to his mortgage applications. The U.S. Attorney's Office stated, "The evidence was overwhelming. No reasonable prosecutor could decline prosecution." Schiff maintained his Senate seat pending trial, but lost all committee assignments. He became the first sitting senator to be under indictment for non-campaign-related fraud in decades. California Democrats began discussing how to replace him if convicted. His political career, which had seemed headed toward possibly running for governor or even president, was over. The Russia collusion narrative he'd pushed for years was thoroughly discredited. New polls showed 68% of Americans believed Schiff had lied about having evidence and abused his position for political purposes. More broadly, the Patel-Schiff confrontation represented a cultural shift. The era of politicians using congressional hearings for pure political theater was ending. The era of accountability based on actual evidence was beginning. Young prosecutors and FBI agents saw Patel as proof that doing your job with integrity, following evidence wherever it leads, could survive Washington's political warfare. Politicians of both parties became more careful about making claims they couldn't back with evidence. And Democrats, who'd spent years claiming the justice system was broken, realized it works fine when applied equally to everyone, including their own heroes. The confrontation proved that authentic evidence beats political theater, that documentation beats accusation, that justice, when properly applied, is nonpartisan. Adam Schiff had spent 8 years as the public face of investigating Donald Trump. He'd claimed moral authority. He'd wrapped himself in constitutional principles. He'd positioned himself as the defender of democracy. But when faced with actual evidence of actual crimes, all that righteousness disappeared. Because at the end of the day, evidence doesn't care about your political narrative. And Kash Patel had the evidence. If you made it this far, you've witnessed something historic. You just watched an FBI director, the man who wrote the Nunes memo exposing FISA abuse, systematically destroyed the senator who spent years lying about Russia collusion, with evidence, with documents, with criminal referrals, with FBI investigations. Smash that like button if you think more politicians need to be held accountable with actual evidence. Subscribe, because we're covering the Schiff investigation and trial as it unfolds. Share this everywhere before mainstream media tries to spin it away. Comment below. Should Adam Schiff resign from the Senate? Is mortgage fraud for 16 years a serious crime, or just a mistake? Were you surprised by the evidence Patel presented? Who else needs to be investigated with this level of scrutiny? Turn on notifications, because when someone with actual authority confronts a politician with actual evidence, this is what accountability looks like. This story proves several critical things. 1. Social media fame and cable news appearances mean nothing when you're facing an FBI director with documented evidence of your crimes. 2. Politicians who spent years investigating others should be prepared to have their own conduct investigated with the same intensity. 3. Building a career on manufactured scandals about collusion doesn't protect you when you're caught committing actual crimes.